Big, small, niche. We're talking about money, demographics, and the future of farming in America in this episode of the Business of Agriculture. Are you looking for productive efficiencies in growing higher yielding, better performing crops? New Fields Ag provides a complete portfolio of biological products focused on you, the farmer. Visit newfieldsag.com for more information to help you farm better. Hey there, welcome to another fantastic episode of the Business of Agriculture. I got a great one for you today. I've got Adam Lasch on here. He's a Wisconsin farmer, and he's active on social media. That's how I found him, and we keep up with each other's stuff. We're talking about what the future of farming looks like in this country. Obviously, we have a tremendous amount of consolidation. As I point out in my book, Food Fear, which came out over 5 years ago, that we have been consolidating agriculture since 1935. We hit peak farm in 1935 with 6.8 million farms. Now we have less than 2 million. Of those 2 million, it's actually 1.88 million right now in the United States. The vast majority of them produce almost nothing. I'm not being mean. I'm just saying they're farms on paper. To be a farm on paper, you have to sell $1,000 worth of agricultural product or be an enterprise that normally would sell $1,000 worth of agricultural product in a given year. So it doesn't take much to qualify as a farm. Point I'm making here is we're going to see consolidation, but we're also going to have young people like my friend Adam on here that are coming up. You know, there's a big dearth. That means shortage of people my age in production agriculture because coming through the 1980s obviously was a very dark spot, and we also were glutted with the baby boom generation. So we're talking about demographics, we're talking about money, because let's face it, it takes a lot of money to be in this business, very high capital, low margin business. That's the way commodity production works. So that's what I'm talking about, big, small, niche, the future of agriculture, and we're going to be right back to the two things that impact it, because it impacts everything, money and demographics. Adam, did I set that up for us right?
Yes, you did. Thank you very much, Damian, for having me on.
You're pretty active about this. You've already started putting down your notes. So take me from just my opening statement to where we are.
Sure. Let's figure out where we've been. Okay, you talked about demographics and how we've lost farms basically since the 30s.
And by the way, to say lost, you and I both.
Yeah.
I like that you're not the. If you ate today, think a farmer type. I can't stand all that stuff. They're not lost. Like they didn't go to the bottom of the sea. They went away. And I think we should also point out, you know, when everyone laments this in the NPR or the New York Times about small farms going away, a lot of times they go away because it's hard damn work because there's no money in it. You know, there's a lot of times that farms people stop the business because it's hard and it's not that profitable. That's one of the realities. It's not like, contrary to what the New York Times editorial piece might tell you, a lot of farms don't go away because some big, mean, big-time operator comes over and squashes you. Sometimes they just go away because it's a hard business to be in.
Well, ag used to be a much younger man's game. And as things got easier, technology got easier. You know, the current, I think it was last year, it's September 24, NASS came out with their demographics of ag. We had a total of 3.374 million farmers in the country. And of that, 1.29 were over the age of 65. The next 840,000 were over the age of 55. The youngest, 1.1, almost 1.2 million, were under the age of 54. So we have a huge demographic problem where 2/3 of people are over the age of 55. That's old. And then you start looking back. Why is that? You talk about the 80s. That had a huge part of it. But what drove the 80s? Go back a little further. The inflation of the 70s, correct? You were a kid then.
Yep.
Talk about that.
Yeah, the inflation of the 70s, and I've had to, and I don't bother arguing, but I've had to point out some of these things. You know, you hear some ag people, well, Jimmy Carter caused the meltdown of the 80s farm crisis. I'm like, well, it's more complex than that. I mean, yeah, Carter was generally bad for the United States of America, undoubtedly. I mean, the old man died, so we all had to pretend that somehow we were sad. And I'm like, I lived through the Carter, so trust me, he's shithoused an entire country pretty badly, you know, between the Iran situation and the economy and stagflation, et cetera. 70s created the 80s. World supply, global oversupply created the 80s. One thing that you're talking about on the money thing is obviously the 18% interest rates. I mean, when you're talking about a business that in general cranks out single digit margins, because we do in agriculture. We're working. How do you use 18% money to make 8% returns? Clearly, that doesn't work. If you're going to borrow money, the use of borrowed capital has to make you more than the cost of the capital, right? And that intrinsically, it never made sense.
Exactly. So I'm going to back up even a little further. Coming out of World War II, we had what is called the baby boom. The U.S. Census Bureau likes to call it the baby boom generation from 1946 to 1964.
Yep.
I think we can back it up just a little bit and go closer to 60 and classify them as boomers. The boomers is the largest generation that has ever happened in American history. Millennials are coming close, but we're still not quite there. Yep. There were so many kids. They literally drove the policies of the rest of the country.
Yep.
Everybody came home from the war. Let's have a family. They didn't just have one kid. They had a lot of kids.
Yep.
So everything you saw has been basically for the last 70 years has been driven by that demographic. Mm-hmm. The 50s, everything was about young kids, schools, community, subdivisions, all of that. How do we raise families? The 60s, all the turmoil in the 60s, what were these guys doing? They came of age. They were rebelling against the man, all of that.
By the way, just a full disclaimer here, Adam, when it comes to the baby boomers, because they're the most self-congratulatory, self-absorbed generation, and I guess maybe it's not their fault. They had Dr. Spock, and the entire child psychology of the 50s and 60s was all about them. And I'm here as a Gen Xer, a very proud Gen Xer, completely not even mentioned. Goes right from the boomers to the damn millennials, and we're just like this non-existent out here. Anyway, go ahead.
Yep. So I want to tie that together. So think of these boomers as a gigantic wave of population. There was 75 million of them in a total population of about 1970 was only 200 million. So over 1/3 of the people were all in that 20-year demographic. What do people in big groups by age do? They all do the same thing. So when you're in your 20s, what are you doing? You're trying to buy a car, trying to move out, trying to get a first job, going through school. You're starting your life. So I'm going to make the case that the inflation of the 70s was driven by the boomer demographic coming of age. Yep. There was a lack of capital because everybody older than them was a smaller number. And there was a huge need to start houses and families and household formation in the 60s, 70s, and early 80s. Mm-hmm. And that in turn required us coming off the gold standard in 1971. So demographics shapes generations, and generations shape demographics shapes history, and history shapes demographics. So
now, and of course, there's somebody that's listening to this says, "Hey, this is all neat," and I agree, but how does it have to do with agriculture? And I think you can obviously you've made this point, and you're going to make this point. It ties directly to agriculture because on a demographic situation, there's this huge supply of producers in production agriculture that are in that 60s to 70s, boomers, right?
Yep.
And the thing is, they could do it. In other words, it was exceedingly difficult to be my age and coming into agriculture unless you were very well capitalized and didn't have a bunch of siblings, which obviously none of those applied to me. Who the hell wanted to go into a business where it was 18% interest rates and your neighbors were going broke?
Exactly. So coming out of the 70s, what were all those guys doing? They were starting farms. Mm-hmm. They had a huge demand for capital. They were producing. This is the whole Earl Butz thing in the early 70s. Let's fence line to fence line, get bigger, get out. There was so many people trying to get into the business of ag that they crowded each other out. What did that do? That crimped capital markets and led to the 18% interest because we just couldn't finance everything doing what we were doing. That led to huge overproduction coming out of the 70s and led to the 80s. The problems of the 80s were largely a demographically driven phenomenon. So you had this bifurcation. Ag was overcapitalized. The money was too freely given in the early 80s. My dad talks about going into the CSP or CPS Credit Production Corporation or whatever.
It used to be the precursor to the farm. The precursor to the farm credit system was production credit. And that's funny. You got quite a bit of history. Not to mention your mention of Earl Butz, a Purdue man and former Secretary of Agriculture. So yes, if the person listening to this is not as historically oriented, Earl Butz was during the 70s when the commodity production in the United States was just gangbusters, and he was championing that whole thing. It's the same old thing. Feed the world, feed the world. We're all going to starve if you don't produce more soybeans in Ohio. So plant from fence row to fence row was his thing. And then obviously by 1982, we're like, oh shit, we've got way too much stuff.
So what happens when you tell a bunch of young guys with lots of energy, go produce? They do. Yeah. What did they do? They produced a lot. Yeah. And that led to the basic crash in coming into the 80s. I think we bottomed land prices in Iowa in 85, 86, somewhere in there.
Yeah, the bloodbath began in the spring, summer of 81, and then didn't. And honestly, it was a bloodletting for at least the entire 80s, really. But by the mid 80s, as I always point out, Adam, to younger folks, I'm like, hey, I'm not doing the walk uphill through a blizzard and all that kind of stuff. But I said, this is a true story. There were assets in places like Indiana, where I'm from. There were farming operations that were so underwater, meaning so broke, the bank didn't repossess them. And I've had people say, no, how would that be? I said, well, if you had an 80% loan to value and everything on that farm, the acreage, and then they built a new hog or a dairy facility, it was depreciated. So 2 years into a facility, if it dropped by 50% in value, which farms did, and you got 80% loan, the bank would be like, "Whoa, we're gonna lose 30 more percent by taking this back. Screw it. You just stay out there and keep figuring out if you can make a payment once in a while."
Right. No, and I'm simplifying it. There was a lot going on, and it was horrible for the people that had to go through it. Yep, but what happened? What are the people that are farming today? They're the survivors of that. That shaped their worldview. Okay. Yep. It's huge. Basically, think of it like a tide on the ocean. That wave came through. That's the boomer wave. So your generation, Damian, being an Xer, you were in the trough of that wave. That's why there's so few Xers, and there was a lot fewer of them just born. So now we have the next wave coming, the millennials. But we don't have that many millennial farmers. They're just not out there. So where are we at today? 2005, basically. Interest rates peaked in about 85, 86 at 21 or 18%, something like that. And we had basically a 40-year decline. So if you bought anything in the 80s, you've had that huge run up in asset values because of declining interest rates. You could always refinance it and keep going. Yep. That worked great for the guys that are there. So now where are we? We're 25 years ahead. Okay. 30 years ahead. We've had that much extra asset appreciation. What happens to you as you get older and your kids move out? Your income goes up because you're no longer.
And also, if you've accumulated, then obviously, if your expenses go down while your net worth goes up, if you've done things correctly, and that's obviously what you were alluding to. If I'm a 68-year-old farm couple, I very likely have several $1 million of real estate holdings that my basis is, $600 an acre or $1,000 an acre, and it's worth 12. So you're talking about massive amounts of capital, and that's where obviously on the money and demographics, how in the hell would a 30-year-old hop into this without inheritance?
It's going to be difficult here. But the beauty of this is where we're at today, and government policy had a lot to do with it. This is the boomers, because they were such a big wave and they basically controlled everything. You can look at politics, you can look at farm policy, you can look at, down to the local level, the school boards even. They've controlled everything. So they basically, you said it, they're a fairly congratulatory group. They voted themselves and implemented a lot of policies that were beneficial to them. Makes sense. Yep. This is where you get things like the RFS mandate. This is where you get things like crop insurance that just keeps getting better and better and better. This is ad hoc payments. You get a lot of that. So basically, ag policy the last 35 years has been a boomer-driven ag policy. And my base case is we're coming to the end of that. They're getting older, and they've basically run their course. Going forward.
Wait a minute. Wait. I want to hear where we're going forward, and I want to get into why you think it's coming to an end, because I could make a couple of arguments that it's not. Before I do that, I want to remind you that my friends at Redox make this show possible, and I was just up earlier this month in Burley, Idaho, to see their headquarters. I had a really good time. Went to their greenhouse, saw the research they're doing. The future is going to involve less applied nutrients. It's one of my big things I've been talking about a lot. There's going to be more scrutiny. My friend Adam, that's on this call right now, is in southern Wisconsin. You never heard about nitrates in the water 20, 30, 40 years ago. You're hearing about it now, and it's in agricultural areas. They're going to blame the dairy farms where he is. Over in northern Ohio, not too far from my farm, it was Lake Erie in the algae bloom. And my friend Temple Rhodes out in the Chesapeake watershed. I was just last week in western Nebraska, and the point of my presentation was all about this nutrient issue. Why am I telling you this when I'm talking about redox? Because in the future, you're going to use more biologicals and more bionutrients that get more benefit out of the stuff that's already in your soil, meaning you probably are over applying your basic NPs and Ks, because that's what everybody's been trying to sell you your whole entire career in this business. Guess what? There are alternatives. Companies like Redox that have been around for 31 years now, they actually have a product that is working, and it can help you reduce applied nutrients and not sacrifice yield. In fact, you'll gain yield. You can learn more about this. Redox provides superior nutrition with biostimulants focused on maintaining plant charge balance. All of your nutrients that you put out there have a positive or a negative charge. If you maintain your charge balance, it allows your plants to focus on yield and quality with improved performance come harvest time. Learn more at redoxgrows.com. That's redoxgrows.com. You say it's coming to an end. There's a couple of thoughts, though. We said we're calling this, money and demographics and the future of farming. You can farm until you're in your 80s. Many people do. It's not like you're out there hopping fences and carrying 5-gallon buckets to slop the hogs as much anymore. It's an easier business in terms of the physical nature of it. Don't start, you're picking on us. We're farmers. We work hard. Yeah, well, I'm going to call bullshit about that. Sit down with these farm people that eat like they're going to go out and dig ditches all day, and then they go and sit in their tractor that steers itself on their Twitter feed. Anyway, you can do this. You can do this until you're old. Also, it's because it's a capital-intensive, low-margin business. It does favor, this deck is stacked in the favor of the older, well-capitalized operator. And it used to be a young guy like you or somebody like me that didn't come into it with any money. You could make up for it by just working harder and doing stuff that other ones didn't want to do. Feed hogs, milk cows, that kind of thing, which is what you're doing. Yep. But anyway, I could make the case that it doesn't come to an end. I don't see policy changing, except for getting more environmental. I don't see policy changing that would change it, and I don't see the people that are 68 years old necessarily going away, because most farmers do not retire. They stick around until they can't.
True, but take that big generation. The average life expectancy has actually gone down the last few years. Where the average, if you're a male and you make it to 65, you're more than likely going to make it to 76 or whatever. But the average age of death in the U.S. is about 75. So if you're a 65-year-old guy, you got 10 years. Yeah, statistically, that's a hard thing for a lot of guys to hear. So here's the thing: what got us to where we're at, for it to continue the way it is, everything has to be the same. So are you willing to bet that all ag policies will stay exactly the same? I'm not. And I'm going to say, the reason I'm going to say that is because the populist nature of this last election and just where the world's going sure doesn't seem like that's a good bet going forward.
I think I could get on board with that. Do you see a policy that, though, RFK, last summer I shot a video and put it on social media. RFK was talking about how we need to give small farmers an environment where they can win, and we do away with these large farms. Is it they're going to come in with a hatchet? I mean, what would be the legislation or the nature of the law that would change?
I don't know if they're going to do so much as promotion or just start taking away some of the carrots and the crutches that we currently have. Crop insurance is a huge thing. I just saw it today, and I don't know the validity. I haven't had a chance to research it, but they were saying something about the corn production balance in Texas based off of crop insurance. Crop insurance pays 125% more than they take in, versus Illinois, which only pays out about 30% of what they take in. So you start looking at it, and it's like crop insurance has been a big driver of this dislocation. So basically, you have the RFS underpinning 5.5 billion bushels of corn demand. That's
and by the way, if I have a lot of my investor friends that listen to this, they might not know what 5 billion is. The easier thing to do is just percentage. Because of the renewable fuel standard, which has been in play now for 20 years. By the way, I did a recording with Jeff Cooper about this. He's the Renewable Fuels Association executive vice president, or president, CEO, whatever the hell he is. 40%. A full-on 40% of America's corn crop gets put in a gas tank. And that's been for the last 20 years. And I'm not being mean, but it's completely unnecessary. I mean, I'm all for it. There's 3 ethanol plants within 30 miles of my farm. It keeps my cash rent up. I'm all for it. I'm just saying we have enough oil. We could go to 3 more parts of the country and start fracking and drill enough oil. So that has bastardized the marketplace.
Well, let's think about it. 20 years ago, we didn't have fracking. We were genuinely facing an energy shortage. I mean, coming out of the whole war on terror and all of that, we literally had way more corn than we needed, and we had to do something with it. So ethanol seemed like a logical thing. I mean, the RINs credit went away in 2011 or something like that, but we still have the RFS is underpinning a lot of corn demand, and that, and my thesis is that, underpinned by crop insurance, is distorting the market away from everything else. Why is the cow herd down to the historic low since 1951? Dairy heifers are in short supply. We've part of that's demographic, because like you said, the old guys are getting out of anything that's hard and they're going into things that are easy. And let's be honest, crop farming is a guaranteed return as long as you can do it fairly well. So,
and by the way, there's going to be someone listening that says, oh, boy, that's not true. The crop insurance situation and USDA policy has essentially made it so that you are at break even at worst. That's the reality. I have farm people that argue with me about this, and they get mad. And I said, well, first off, you have a subsidized crop insurance that guarantees revenue. I'm going to go over here and pick up my shirts at the cleaners. Guess what? You know what the cleaners don't get? They don't get a USDA paid insurance policy that guarantees them net revenue. And so you're right about that.
And I'm not arguing whether it's good or bad. I'm just saying it is. It's a distortion in the market that we have to digest, that we have to take into account. Yeah. And I'm looking forward. And as farmers get fewer and fewer, I'm not convinced that the carrots are going to keep coming agriculture's way with the populace, with the debt we've got. Yeah. I just am not entirely convinced that we can bank on it's going to keep continuing.
We have not seen, you talk about Earl Butz in the old days, and then we talked about the 80s. The last time that the government policy allowed there to be a bloodbath was the 80s. And the message got sent pretty darn loud and clear from about early 90s on. We got to not allow this to happen. I mean, literally, bankers got shot. I point that out a lot, and I'm not in any way being mean. It's a true story. One of the small towns I've worked in Iowa, farmer walked in and shot his banker. That didn't happen just once. It happened more than once. There hasn't been a... We have not allowed that to happen for more than 30 years.
Right. But here's the problem: because there's so many fewer farmers every year, the institutional knowledge of what actually happened in the 80s is going away. So what happened? What's the human condition? We continually make the same mistakes.
Right. Yeah. So when we talk about the demographics, like you said, neither of us are making any judgments other than say, here's what they are. You could say, we're going to have this real need for farm people, 30s, 20s, to come out here and do this because we're expiring out all the other ones. And I've heard that stated, and I know that we have a big thing in our industry, Adam, where we say we got to get more young people involved. I think a handful of people can do. In other words, I'm not worried about it because we can do so much more with such fewer hands in this business because of technology.
I agree with that. But I think that it's going to look different going forward. Do we need 40% of our corn grown in this country to go to ethanol?
No.
There's a case to be made. No, we don't. Meanwhile, our trade deficit's what, 46 or $50 billion? We import other stuff. Yeah. I mean, you look around the landscape and it has had profound changes on the landscape simply because of those two crops. And the other, the alternative crop is soybeans. Brazil is kicking our butt on soybeans production.
Yeah.
So we're already at the case of where are we going from here? Because carbon, I haven't even brought this up yet, but carbon was going to be the savior going forward. Well, it looks like that's kind of dead on arrival, I would say. So
it got a lot of action for a few years, and I'm afraid that it's. I'm afraid that you're right. I think it's probably done.
I think it is. So here's the thing. Okay, that was going to be the next logical, taking ethanol to the next level, SAF, all of that. And now where do we go? So we're in this uncomfortable position where we have no idea what's coming. And we know that the old model is not serving enough people. So when you have a younger generation that cannot get in, old guys are not getting out. It's in, I hate to say this, but it's in the best interest of the younger people, the new entrants, to tear down the old system and start with something new. And this is classic. I mean, this is what happens when you have such a dislocation. So taking it back to the boomers, they were such a dominant generation. It makes sense that there's going to be some distortions there going forward. You look at the stock market, you look at real estate, you look at housing, you look at everything.
Yep.
Insurance costs, it's all there because of them.
Yep. So I don't know that when you talk about, is in the best interest of the next generation to tear down the institution that is essentially keeping them at bay. How's that done?
I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. Right. That's the thing. We don't know, but it wouldn't take much. You pull back on the crop insurance subsidy, or you means test that, or something, and a few little distortions. Take away the ethanol mandate. I mean, they're trying to do it for E15. If I am fully convinced ethanol would be a much more viable interest if they had not had the mandate, because the mandate is politically unpalatable for most consumers.
Yeah, yeah, and well, most consumers don't really know it.
Right.
I mean, it was in the common media 20 years ago when the thing got passed. I'm not sure that most consumers really have much of a clue about the whole thing at this point. Yeah. So when you talk about where the future is, I get asked this question about young people in ag, and again, when we said big small niche, we know that something like 16,000 of the 1.9 million farms produce half of all the agricultural revenue. So 16,000 of 1.9 million are producing half of all the crop revenue, all the agricultural revenue. And so, and I'm not making any judgments at all. It's just that that's some realities. Then there's that next tier, and you milk 50 cows, which would be a standard operation in 1980, not or 70s, not so much now. And you are a smaller producer, but you're not compared to the other 1.9 million farms out there. You'd be in the top 100,000 in terms of ag revenue, probably top 50,000 in terms of ag revenue, based on your milk check and whatever your direct to beef, consumer beef, and all that.
So we've kind of gone down the model of, we don't need to make 100,000 in one thing. We need to make 1,000 in 100 things. Mm-hmm. So we have not relied solely on the dairy income. We save all our own replacements. We save all our own feeder cattle. We do a lot of different diverse crops, and that's how we're able to make it, simply because of diversity. So my feeling, especially for like the dairy industry and such, it's going to go back from huge to more modern, moderate to middle sized. And as labor gets more expensive and harder to come by, the knowledge gap is going to be huge. And that is one of the biggest things. It's easy to grow corn. It's easy to grow soybeans. There's going to be guys that are angry at that. Livestock production takes work. It is a knowledge-based business. And it has been, let's say, underwhelmed, because it's easier just to grow corn and soybeans. So that's why cattle are at record high prices right now. Look at the outrage over eggs right now, because we've consolidated that industry.
Yeah, so I want to. There's no question looking at that. By the way, I got to do another commercial spot here for my friends at Grip. If you are an agricultural operator and maybe you have a bunch of employees, you've got all kinds of different conversations going on. Are you doing this? Are you managing your agricultural industry? Are you managing your agricultural business with Post-it notes and text messaging? There's an easier way. It's a technology, and it goes right here on your phone. Yes, I'm holding up my phone. If you were watching this on my YouTube channel, you would know that. But if you're listening, I appreciate it just the same. But do go to my YouTube channel and hit subscribe, please. Want to grow my YouTube following. Grip. It's got a chat-like interface so that your farm can do it. You just pick up your phone and you, boom, put it in there and then say, hey, Alexander, you got to take care of this problem over here in the pump house, whatever it should be. It's got automatic Spanish to English translations. It's got picture capture. It's no wonder farmers across America are ditching handwritten notes and texting for Grip. You can keep all of your knowledge and your conversations on your farm and at your fingertips. Do not have to have an app. You do not have to have a password. You do not have to do any of that stuff. You can get a grip on your operation. Do it this spring. New subscribers will get 20% off with code Damian20. That's my name, Damian20. Go to gripp.ag to learn more. You just said you think something like dairy industry is going to revert back to your size of an operation versus the dairy operations that are milking thousands of cows. I rent my land to a thousands of cows kind of a dairy operator, and I was the kind of operator that you are now. So I've certainly got a fair amount of experience here. Why do you think that?
So I should maybe qualify. I don't know if it's necessarily going to be a 50 cow dairies, but I could see it going very robotic to solve the labor shordage. And I could see it being one family with say 120 cows, so 2 boxes, 2 robots, or say four robots and 240 cows. So I think that's going to be a much more sustainable model. We talk about capital. Where's interest costs now? What built the dairy industry the last 40 years?
Borrowed money.
Cheap interest.
Cheap borrowed money. So you're saying that now that we're going from 4% money to 8% money or 3% money to 7.5%, so we're more than a doubling of the cost of capital. You think that then makes it even now those large operations can still access capital though.
They can. And they will, but they maybe don't have the labor. There's other maybe it's the manure thing. There's other things that can take them out. You know what I mean? Capital is going to be fine for them, but it's all the other things. How do we get enough feed? How do we get enough labor to do this? How do we get enough? It could be biosecurity stuff. It could be distribution on the land. We just can't haul our manure. I mean, we've kind of seen that as the big dairies, moved out. They coat all their land with manure close, and then now they're hauling it further and further and further, and that's not a sustainable model at some point,
Right. Yeah. Well, especially if you're trucking a lot of water, frankly, when you're hauling.
Right. If you look at it, transportation costs right now,
What about on the demographic thing? It's farming got cool again. It was nothing cool about agriculture when I was there, when I was a kid. And it's gotten cool again. And, the social media thing, and then look at all the following that younger people have that are agricultural people. So I think that the demographics want to be here. It's obviously the same old challenge, though, is about how do you make money at it? And that's the thing. When everything is in oversupply, the future of farming, I could make the argument that the future of farming, everybody thinks it's going to be, it's great big corporations are going to do this. Hey, why would they want to? Why?
Exactly.
If I had $100 million to play with, how much of it would I put into an agricultural production model? Very little of it, because I can make 5% just putting it in a money market. I can go sprinkle it around into varying other investments and average between 5 to 25% returns. Why in the hell would I put it into production agriculture where the returns are seriously single-digit percentage and you've got the work?
Exactly. Why would you? So you wouldn't. And what do investors want? They want a deal on the front end and they want capital appreciation on the back end. So they're looking for somewhere to put money. As these boomers get older and they start maybe liquidating investments or dying off, or heirs get it, the things are going to change. One thing we haven't even touched on, Damian, that I think is going to drive some of this. You say we have a lot of overproduction. We do not have an overproduction in things like beef.
That's right. Yeah, right now,
so there's
the beef herd is, like you said, is the low of numbers as it was in the 1950s or 60s, and the prices are up, but it hasn't really discouraged consumption. I think we still did about 57 pounds of beef consumption per American per year in the year 2024, and that was pricing that is arguably 50 to 100% more than it was just 5 years ago.
Exactly. So there's going to be an opportunity there. And why is that? Beef cattle are a slow, long-term process, and they're work. Guys don't want to, you're in Arizona right now. Yeah. Guys want it to be able to take off. So here's a chance for a young guy to get in and build a future around a cow herd or beef production and local marketing. It kind of gets into it. The carnivore diet, that is, I think, is what part of it is underpinning it. But take something off the wall. I think ag is going to look different. Flower farming, that is the hottest thing right now from the Instagram thing. The flower farmers are niche wheat production, niche the sourdough boom. Whatever you want to go with, we've got all of this other stuff. I think it's going to be, because of social media, it's going to be closer to the consumer. I don't know exactly what that looks like. There's a guy in northern Iowa growing, he's got 3.5 acres of vegetables and he's making a living doing it. Yeah. It's going to look different. the millennial generation and younger is going to seek out those opportunities because, like you say, there is demand there for that. There's a demand to get back to the land. I think this is the trad wife movement and the more traditional. We've seen what Go has produced, and I think there's going to be this is part of history. There's kind of a wash back of a more traditional value or a more closer to what they're at.
So there's certainly, you've got a fan in RFK Jr. that's been banging this drum for a while. I don't know that he's going to affect policy, but I just released an episode. By the time you're hearing this, you'll have heard my episode about RFK, to pretend that he doesn't have influence over farms moving forward. We removed a red dye from children's cereal as soon as RFK Jr. looked like he was going to be involved in the government. And we already then are hearing for the first time true legislation that changes what welfare recipients can spend their supplemental nutrition assistance program money on in terms of type of food. So pretend that RFK Jr. is not going to have an influence on this industry is ridiculous. I do think they're talking about incentivizing smaller production agriculture. I just wonder what that would look like.
I mean, maybe I can't speculate on exactly what it's going to be. I don't know how much power he actually has in the end, but things like just eliminating some of the regulations on food production across state lines and some of that USDA, like the PMO and the pasteurized milk ordinance. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there. Technology has especially in the dairy industry, technology has way overcome a lot of these regulations, and we have not, the regulations themselves have not kept up. So, and this is not a raw milk debate, any of that. But
now you're going to we're supposed to be talking about money, demographics, the future of farming. Now you're going to get me going off about dairy and how horrifically outdated they are. They still put on their jugs no RBST. There's not a consumer within 50 miles of my suburban house here in Phoenix that has a clue what RBST is and why are we still putting it on the label. Been doing it for 30 years.
But think about it. Demographics ties into this because culture and politics is downstream of demographics.
Yes.
So that is the most boomer type policy. We can probably get rid of it and eliminate it. And I think you're seeing this with a lot of the younger generations. We're smart. You go online. You have more information in your cell phone. I don't know when you were a kid, but when I was a kid, that was always, you're not always going to have a calculator in your pocket. Yeah, right. Well, guess what? I now have all of the information in America or in the world from human history in my phone.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that was the old thing. You don't rely on a calculator. Someday you won't have your calculator. Well, my God, like you said, Anyway, what about you said you think that there's a case behavior for small. I do agree. Direct to consumer, the internet was already going in that direction, and then that whole COVID thing. 20 years ago, if you'd have said, "Hey, in less than 2 decades, you're going to get on this phone." Back 20 years ago, people were still using flip phones. You're going to get on this thing, and you're going to order up. Some dude named Larry is going to show up at your door in a Toyota Camry and haul you to the airport. Like, no. You mean a cab? No, it's not going to be a cab. It's just some dude named Larry in his Toyota. Nah, obviously that's happening. And then, as you said, the direct consumer, it suffers from a matter of scale. In other words, you go to enough of these ag meetings. Well, you know what you need to do? You need to sell direct to consumer. Yeah, you said there's a guy in Iowa that's got a 3.5 acre vegetable farm. I applaud all of this. I do. But it's tough to compete with Costco, Walmart, Target, and Kroger. And that's where I think direct to consumer is more viable than it's ever been. This whole COVID thing, we got people that get on their phone and order food to be brought to their house. And that never happened 20 years ago, 10 years ago, not even hardly 5 years ago. So there's this reality that's happening here, Adam. I don't know that it ever becomes mainstream.
I'm going to push back a little bit on that. Look at what happened to supply chains. Look at what happened during that event here a few years ago. Look at the egg thing now, especially. People are losing their minds over the fact that the eggs are $8 a dozen. My wife told me today, last time she went to the store. Now we have our own chickens, but she always looks, and she said the basic white eggs at the local Walmart were $5.95 a dozen.
Yeah.
So here's my thinking. Maybe it's not. We're in the uncomfortable stages of this. We don't know what it's going to be. It's uncomfortable. Nothing changes until it's so uncomfortable that you are forced to change. Mm-hmm. So the market may not be totally viable today.
Yep.
But I'm not willing to bet that 5 years down the road. I mean, look at the massive changes we've had just in the last 4 or 5 years.
So when your niche becomes too big, then other companies hop into it. Remember, Cargill, I think, is in the organic beef business. No, by the way, you can fact check me. My point is, whether it's them or not, everything once a niche becomes established, it stops being a niche, right? It niches become commoditized, and there is this thing of the opportunity is in a niche. Well, what about when the niche becomes mainstream? We can make that argument. Cage-free eggs were a thing 20 years ago, 10 years ago, that were a smaller producer, and now the great big huge poultry integrators, they produce more cage-free eggs than we even had demand for.
Mm-hmm. And with that has come consumer awareness. So we don't know where the markets are coming. You talk about AI, you talk about all the technology. My basic thing is I don't think we're going to see 120 row planters. I don't think more is going to be bigger. I don't think we're going to have, especially in our area, the big dairies are. I don't think you're going to have more big because they've gotten to that diseconomies of scale size. Yeah. The pushback from the local community and the basic demographics. Here's the other thing about demographics. You know how many guys are just at I'm just skating through for a few more years and then I can retire. There is that. That is a huge portion. I mean, 1.3 are over the age of 65. They're probably as wealthy as they're ever going to be. You have a couple of hiccups, and there may be some opportunities.
Yeah, well, you know what? I've over my witnessing of cycles in this business, I have commonly told those people that are 67 years old that say, I'm going to do this. Why would I get out? I say, you know what happens? Because this is a story that I've seen on repeat. You talk about folks not learning. They say, oh, crap, I stuck around too long. Yeah, you did. You know what? When things are really good, that's time to get out. Your equipment, I've seen this happen. I mean, it's like a record that just keeps playing itself again and again and again. See, your used machinery, which is not really anything that a big modern operator wants, was at its peak 3 years ago. Everything you have, yes. So these 67-year-olds, I don't know what else I'd do. You hear that a lot in agriculture. I don't know what else I'd do if I didn't farm. Like, well, do you like it enough that you want to pay $2 million to do that? What? Well, by staying around for 3 years too long, it might cost you $2 million. That's really what you're talking about.
And what's the number one fear as people get older? Running out of money. So I think this could break loose. You have a few more bad years together, and the investor money doesn't come in like everybody's banking on, and a few more things. The world could get shook there, and suddenly it could be a race to the exits because that same demographic that led us here could also be a firecracker on the way out.
Yeah, well, they're running for the exit, screaming fire on the way out the door. I could see that happening. See, I don't think the land asset in Wisconsin where you are or in Indiana where I am, I think the land where water's scarce or the land where it's highly erodible or the land that requires I've angered people. I've shot a whole video at them about marginal land reverting to trees and fire, wildlife area. But I see those assets declining in value. I see a lot of people that will hang on too long and will have cost themselves. And when I was saying that, it cost you $2 million, I'm talking about degradation of the asset value and depreciation of the machinery, et cetera, and also opportunity cost.
Well, let's look at it this way. And from 2018 to 2022, depreciation on equipment was actually there. It wasn't a thing. All equipment went up for those 4 years, and it was record after record after record of auction prices. Well, now it started to set back. Same thing right now land prices are about as high as they've been ever, all-time high. Say you're a dairy farmer with 500 or 600 cows. There's a lot of guys in this thing. They're in their 60s. All-time high prices on cows. Okay, most of their net worth is tied up in cattle equipment and possibly some land. Here's the thing: what happens if that resets by 30%?
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden, maybe the wife's not so happy letting you watch the retirement income go away. And who's going to buy those assets? Because a lot of times, the younger people simply can't bite off that much of a chunk. Yeah. So what's going to underpin this?
So the argument would be, well, there's going to be very well capitalized 30-year-olds that are from a very well inherited situation that are going to keep absorbing the acres or that's the one argument that would be made. One argument could be that interest rates are going to decline. I don't make that argument. I think this is normal, historically normal. It seems abnormal because for the last 10 or 20 years, we've had interest rates that were ridiculously low. So that's why 8% money seems really high because we were at 3 for so long. Well, this is normal. So I could make the argument that interest rates come down, it softens things up, but I'm not sure that I would make that bet.
Yeah. This is the most abnormal time in history. That's the point I'm trying to get across. We have no idea where we're going from here. All-time highs and everything, demographic bomb coming from retirements. We do not know where we're headed. We have there's a lot of wild cards right now. So what do you have to do? Plan for the worst. Diversify. If there's a contingency, kind of come up with it. But I think what got us to where we're at cannot be continued or be looked on to continue into the future. Let's put it that way.
I think I agree with all of that. In fact, I do agree with all of that. So is that our conclusion, or we got some more to go on here? Because I want you to give me one more conclusion where you think things are going. You already said you think there's room for the smaller operator, more direct to consumer and more close to consumer. I would have to say that, again, I think that's difficult to compete with the Walmarts or the Krogers of the world, but it has got more. That very niche has 10 times itself just in the last 5 years. So I could see that. And I used to be a direct-to-consumer beef producer with my hobby beef operation. So I could see that. There's enough young people. There are enough young people that want to be in the game. It's a matter of the old people, as you say, exiting. And, the calamity sort of prediction that you hypothesized, you didn't really predict it. There's a lot of reasons why that will be avoided, whether it's USDA policy or whatever, because if all of a sudden the entire countryside is, losing 30% of its net worth, it makes things pretty dark. But now here's the thing: I could also argue politically. If you look at the map, the blue happens in Minnesota, Detroit, Chicago, and then the coasts, right? If you were the next round, the post-Trump, whatever that political thing looks like, and you could set policy that harmed the middle, I think you would. I see that coming. I see the retaliation to what's just happened in this most recent election, meaning the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez types will enact a policy that harms the middle. I really believe that. And if that could be ethanol, it could be tougher regulation on environmental, it could be whatever.
I don't disagree with that at all. And one thing I'll say is, there's precedent for this. Look at commercial real estate right now. Mm-hmm. Look at how many companies are taking $30 million baths on buildings that they can't rent out because of work from home and changes there. So to say, land prices are never going to come down or asset prices are going to come down, look at where we're at. We're at all-time highs. The floor is there, but we may be a long way down. We don't know. So going forward, I think you also have to kind of tap into the outlook, and this is where my thing about demographics, generations drive history. The younger people don't have faith in the big institutions like a lot of the older folks do. You talk about competing with the Walmarts. They don't want to play that game. That they're not willing to do it, because look at what it takes to get to that size, and there's just a lot of abnormalities here that they're not even going to play that game because there's no incentive to. You can't outrun what's already there. So they're going to go different.
Yeah, I really think that you're onto something with that, and it's not just a generational rebellion. You spoke about the baby boomers and burning their draft cards and their bras and thinking they were changing the world. I've had to hear the baby boomers. The thing that annoys me the most about them, and there are a lot of things about boomers that annoy me. In fact, most everything about the boomers annoys me. Their insistence that somehow anything that they did was revolutionary. I mean, they think they're the first kids that went to college and smoked pot. They think they're the first kids that rebelled against their parents. And for God's sakes, if I have to hear how good the Beatles were, the Beatles, I think the Spice Girls are better than the Beatles. I said it right there. The Spice Girls are better than the Beatles. Yeah. All right. Anyway, there is the thing about the younger generation and the moving away from, like you said, what's been institutional. Be it Walmart or whatever.
Yeah, look at it. I mean, and that's part of that is natural, but there is going to be changes because you look at if you're a 30-year-old and you can't even buy a house, do you want this to continue? You want your shot. Everybody wants their shot, and that's where we're at right now.
Does the 30-year-old have the shot to be in farming? I think so. You got to be creative.
I think they do, but it's going to look different, and we don't know what that's going to be. But it could be selling sourdough bread out of their thing. It could be flowers. My parents are doing very well with flowers. I mean, they sell a lot of flowers to a lot of people, and they have a wholesale flower business. That's what they do, but they're niche, and you wouldn't think it would happen. Now, one thing I did not touch on: it's not going to look all the same in every area of the country. So you talk about the rough land or the very rural areas. What works near a population center is going to be completely different than if you're in the middle of North Kansas. I mean, and this is where the one size fits all ag policy that we have right now, they're pinned by crop insurance and it doesn't equate for that. Certain ground should be grazed, certain ground should be farmed, and certain ground is better for vegetables. Some's better for, corn silage or alfalfa or whatever. It's going to become bifurcated in ways that we don't know. So it's going to be hyper local. You're going to have to figure out what works in your area and on your ground.
I agree with everything that you just said right there. Not for the whole 50 minutes, but for all that. And by the way, this is a long episode. I said I had to have this guy on because I like his commentary, and he's the first guest that's used the word bifurcate multiple times in the same conversation. Anyway, look it up. I think we're talking about money, demographics, and the future of farming. Are you hopeful as a 40-year-old? And that's the other thing I think we should point out here about your story. You are 40. And you are not fifth generation. You did not inherit a bunch of assets. You built and are building a farming business.
And it was a lot of work, but I've gotten into I was basically had to be an amoeba. Wherever I could find an opportunity, that's what we've done.
Yeah. And it's
hard. It's a lot of work. I don't know if the younger guys are ready to do that, but there will be people out there that are eager to make the shot.
Well, you do a lot of things in a direct to consumer. You do different things. You diversified. You said that your milk is still commodity oriented. You go to your Prairie Farms, which is the second or third biggest milk cooperative in the country for processing. You do sell beef to consumers. You do what's your other stuff?
So the cropping plants, we don't just grow corn and soybeans. We grow different forages, different cover crops, and we're able to pick up things. Our livestock is not all one breed, so we have a lot of different genetics there that we're able to do. Cut down on herd health needs. You can make it work. It's not easy at all, but you better look for the opportunities and then try and pick up every piece and be able to just work hard. There's a lot of work,
How many acres do you cover?
About 250.
And of course, again, that seems small, but you're doing a lot of different stuff on those acres.
And we've always tried to be the end consumer for our own products, meaning we want to sell a value-added product through whatever it is. And our milk goes to Prairie Farms Co-op. They've treated us exceptionally well. Mm-hmm. They have the same model going forward. We're going to be a branded product. We don't want to have to compete with Walmart and their own things. Mm-hmm. We want to sell better quality products. Mm-hmm. All the principles apply. It's just we're in this uncomfortable space where we don't know what the future looks like, and the old model is not looking really well.
Yeah, I think that it's an interesting time as well. I do agree with that. And then the other thing, the last point we should make here is the most recent 20 to 25 years in this business, just like interest rates. What's happened between about the year 2000 and 2025, or 2005 and the last 20 years, is not normal historically. Right. We've had essentially two ag super cycles between 2005 and 2023. In other words, almost all of that 20-year time span, things were really good. I remember it was 2014 to 18. Oh God, things are really bad. I said, no, things are normal. Things are normal. You don't know what really bad is. And I don't see normal commodity production being at those levels in my lifetime. I'm 55, so maybe I make it to 85. I don't see it. It's the future. I think you're right that moving forward, we're oversupplied. We know that there's the consolidation. At some point, consolidation doesn't make you any more money. I mean, it's you're just getting bigger to keep making 4% returns, and I don't see that being very sustainable and economically sustainable.
Well, here's one stat. I mean, the stock market right now is historically overvalued, and it has never had more than 65%. Or put it this way, 70-year-olds and above make up 65% of the stock market. Okay. It's never been that distorted.
Yeah.
So what does that tell you? They're going to pass at some point, and something's got to give. Like, it's just gotta.
Yeah, well, of course, maybe they die, and then the inheritance that's in stock markets gets cashed out, and the grandkids run out and then say, "I'm going to finally be able to buy that house." It doesn't do anything for housing inflation. It makes it worse because then all of a sudden imagine $1 trillion being dumped into the real estate market in a couple year time frame. It would be of new money.
How much gets used up for end of life care?
A lot. That's where the bulk of it gets. Yes. So I guess buy stock in nursing home chains. If you're listening to this, please do indeed check out my YouTube channel. Really trying to put a push on that in the year 2025 to grow my following on YouTube. I put commentary videos out there, and sometimes it's people fight with me about some of the stuff I put out there. But anyway, you go and check it out. Also, remember my friends at Redox. RedoxGrows.com is their website, and then also Grip, GRIPP. If you have a need for their products, and you can also get 20% off using the code Damian20. His name is Adam Lasch, Wisconsin guy, farmer, first generation, diversity guy. I like it. Thanks for being here.
Thank you much, man.
Till next time, I really appreciate you listening. Thanks for being here. If you like what I do, also check out my new show, The Granary. It's shot with my friends from Extreme Ag at my on-farm tavern, my old granary building that's converted to my on-farm tavern. We sit there, we have a drink, and we talk about all kinds of things from real farmers, talking about real issues impacting the personal, the professional, et cetera, et cetera. Go check it out. You can find it on YouTube, or you can go to the extremeag.farm website. Till next time, he's Adam, I'm Damian, and this is The Business of Agriculture. Hey, sincere thanks for joining us here on another episode of The Business of Agriculture. I want to ask you, if you farm, are you looking for more productive efficiencies to grow higher yielding, better performing crops? Well, of course you are. New Fields Ag provides a complete portfolio of biological products focused on you, the farmer. If you want to learn more about the New Fields Ag product lineup, go to newfieldsag.com for information.